Today we are going to be talking about systems thinking. And we are going to be doing this through the lens of Senge's laws of systems and critical theory. So, you're coming into today's discussion. You've been asked to complete the reading, watch the refresher on critical theory, and I'm calling it a refresher because if you took critical thinking as an undergraduate, you have been exposed to critical theory and philosophy. So it should be familiar to you. And if it's not familiar to you and you would like to have a little bit more of a discussion on this, you can see me during my office hours. And then we asked you to watch Senge's introduction to his laws. In that introduction, and we kind of saw how he was taking these really vague, general theories and finding ways to weave them into relationships. And as servant leadership is a relational theory, I think that looking at things in terms of what the relationships are between people is an important way to frame your thinking. It's something you have to practice and try to find different ways to do it. But in almost any part of what you're doing, you need to be thinking about other people and your own personal actions. And then in the groups you were assigned to, you're supposed to pick a current event that reflects or rhymes with an event in our history. And then I've asked you to identify a key leader in that past event, and then kind of use your lens of critical theory to assess a belief, a cultural norm, or an ethical issue that underlies both events. The example I gave you but did not dig into, I kind of left that for you guys to think about on your own, was migrant detention facilities, internment camps, Roosevelt, and racism. So we're going to back up a little bit and talk about why systems are important for servant leaders. And in our last section, we covered foresight, which is the ethic, so to speak, of servant leadership. If you are a servant leader and you are not practicing foresight, you are ethically failing. Of course, how do you foresee? It's not magic. There's no there's no crystal ball, obviously. But there are ways of thinking about things, and that's where critical theory offers a means to kind of think about these systems. But Greenleaf had his own special thing he wanted people to consider in their systems thinking. He had a very optimistic approach for looking at systems. He thought that servant leaders should see things as moving in the right direction, and seeing life in all of its messiness without every end tied up in a perfect little bow. Loving the sheer beauty of the world, which is probably the most challenging of all of these requirements. An ethical conduct, which is, taking personal responsibility or seeking other people to take responsibility for themselves as part of these systems, like saying okay, I will make a stand here or take a stand here. So as we go through that, we have this very optimistic approach to systems that doesn't really offer a way of thinking. So that's where the critical theory comes in. Now, critical theory is a philosophical approach to culture. And it seeks to confront the social, historical, and ideological forces and structures that produce and constrain culture. And the goal of these theories is to free people who are being dominated or oppressed. And that ultimately, anything that you're doing, any knowledge that you're seeking, any relationship that you're having, any impact you're having on the world, should be seeking to free people, to empower them, to make them more autonomous. And as I say those words, it should be reminding you of the goals of Greenleaf's test, which is to empower people, right? To make them freer, healthier, more autonomous, and consider the impact on the least privileged in society. So I think the critical theory pairs very well if you're looking for a philosophical approach to a system. As we're comparing this historical event and a modern event, this Senge's laws kind of set you up for that historical perspective on stuff. And I mean, it starts with today's problems are from yesterday's solution. The way out gets back, brings you back in. For this exercise, look for one of these laws in action. I think it'll cue you in for looking at the other parts, the cultural parts, the strategic parts of your pyramids. This is a systems pyramid. When you're looking at any event, there is a strategy that produced the event, there's a culture that produced the strategy, and there are beliefs that produce the culture. All right, so if you imagine your pyramid as an iceberg, right, whatever you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. And you have to kind of zoom out from that little tip and try to see the bigger picture. Today's assignment, we are going to have every group report their 2 events. And as we do that, I'm going to be putting them into a Google form for you guys to vote on. And then the winning event is going to be talked about by everybody. So with that, we're going to look at these events, and every single group is going to identify at least one of Senge's laws in the modern event with support from the historic event. And then we are going to create a systems pyramid for both the historic event and the modern event. You're going to have about 25 minutes to complete this task, and then you're going to come up and draw your pyramids on the whiteboard. We're going to look for the commonalities and the differences between everybody's pyramids, and that will lead into a discussion on the actual leaders for next class period. Was their response directed at the event, at the strategy, at the culture, or at the belief? I'm going to take you through it real quick before we break off into our small groups. The Senge's law that I kind of used to key in and find the different levels of this pyramid was that the cure is worse than the disease. For the example that I gave you guys last time, without very much information on why you were trying to do this, we talked about detention camps, right? And so the historical event was the Japanese internment camps, which was the response to a culture that believed that immigrants were dangerous because there was war in their country. So because these people were related distantly, however, to people where there was war, our government said, well, they could be spies, they could be dangerous, so we are going to walk them up into groups. And then, of course, there's a belief underlying that people who are different are the other. And that's something, again, you should have had a discussion about in your philosophy classes. And in this case, they weren't only different, they were also considered dangerous and inferior. For today's pyramid, the same thing. We have the strategy and the event are about the same, right? That's the rhyming, the repeating of history. And then when you dig down into it again, you're looking at the culture that says, okay, why is it okay to lock up immigrants? And the rationalization that you'll hear is that there's war, there's gangs, and it's basically creating fear of the other again. And these people are to be feared because they're different, they're dangerous, and they are inferior. This is going to be your product that you put up on the board, but you're going to need to have supporting evidence of your product. This is the supporting evidence I've supplied, but I'm leaving it up to you guys to find your own different evidence that you think would be appropriate for the discussion. This video is available on your Blackboard, and you guys can watch them and assess them for evidence and see if you think that they were good supporting evidence or not, and then use them as a model or a starting point for finding your own evidence. So, is there any questions about what we're going to do today?